I'm not an expert in shale gas at all, so I've been here to listen and to learn. I'd like to ask if other members of the audience, particularly those who, like me, have been ignorant until today of many of the aspects of shale gas that we've heard about, if there are any more questions which have come to mind that the earlier speakers during the day might wish to answer. Now's your chance, if you've been storing up that question from this morning and it's still there. Wait for the mic, please. It won't take long.
Hello, John Hackett, Anglian Water again. A very quick question. I didn't get a sense of it through these speeches. Was how long is the period of fracking before you go to commercial extraction?
I'd like one of the speakers to answer that. So is that something you could answer, Richard? How much time is taken in a fracking exercise?
Well, I mean, a quadrilla here, but are you talking about the fracking process?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Just period of fracking progress before you've got to the point where you feel it's commercially viable, and then you stop it and then proceed onto commercial extraction.
That is a good question. I mean, the actual fracking takes perhaps an hour or two per frack job. Okay, that's first part of that. In terms, I mean, I don't fully know. I think you could look at Pennsylvania as an example of the timescale, because that's happened quite quickly over the last 5 or 6 years. And you could look at the number of wells that are being drilled, and there's a lot of wells being drilled. So Pennsylvania's probably been the quickest example of development of shale gas and going from fracking into appraisal, an exploration well into appraisal and into production. But I don't know, there isn't any, it's a bit like how long's a piece of string, but Pennsylvania is an example. Perhaps
I suppose, am I thinking hours, days, months, something general like that?
Months to years.
If you had something average on per well basis, that would be useful.
Yeah. I think your question is like on water usage, how much water is actually getting used over what period of time, so on a per well basis.
Not necessarily water usage, about vulnerability to time exposure to pressures.
So the typical fracs in a development scenario on a per well, like you said, that individual frac is maybe an hour, hour and a half type of thing, and depending on how many fracs you do per well, so this would be 10 or 15 fracs per well, and that would be done over probably a couple weeks. And then that, for that individual, for that individual well, that's complete. Okay, so there's no more water usage at that point for that well. As you have more and more wells, obviously that's going on at several wells at the same time or over the development life of the field, but the actual water usage for each well is over a very short period of time.
Question behind you.
I'm Samuela Basse from the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics. I also have a question regarding timeline. It's probably more for Tony Grayling, but maybe others can also help. It's related to the fact that shale gas is often seen as a possible transition fuel towards decarbonization. But because climate change targets are changing across time, it might make a difference when shale gas will be commercially viable, actually. So I wanted to know if there's any estimate as to when this could happen at a national scale in the UK or in Europe. Will it take 2, 5 years, 10 years time? Thank you.
I'm not sure whether Tony would like to answer that or not. It's a bit of a geological question. Mike, would you like to pick that one up, please? Yes.
Yeah, this idea of a bridge between where we are now, intensive fossil fuels, and very stringent reductions in our CO2 emissions, so, very high percentage by, say, 2050. In the last few years, I suppose in the last 5 years, one of the ways that people thought it could be done would be CCS on power stations. That and combined with general reduction in energy usage or more efficient. What I've noticed in the press, I mean, there was, if you read The Economist last week, or if you looked at the IEA, certainly this idea that shale gas might be another bridge, in the sense that way of generating electricity with about a lot more than a coal plant with CCS. On the other hand, if you look at CCS, there have been great difficulties thinking about how it's going to. And if you look at shale gas, you don't need any money to make it speed at which it's happened in the United States, I don't think it necessarily would happen as fast here. But I'm not saying that I think this is a good way of bridging between heavy fossil fuel use and certainly a way that it might be doing. It's not as efficient. It's going to produce a lot more carbon than CCS on coal plants and realistically, if you look, a lot of gas plants are being commissioned in this country, and there's nothing much happening on CCS.
Peter, would you like to add to this?
Well, if you're going to take the broad issues, you've also got to look at general security of supply and the issues to do with transport of gas. You know, we are genuinely now short of gas. Okay? And if we bring it from the former Soviet Union, the average pipeline leakage is 1.5%. Methane on a 20-year timescale is 70 times as bad as it, not 22. 72 times 1.5 is about 108%. It actually produces more CO2 effect in transporting the gas from the former Soviet Union than burning it. Okay? It's more than that volume of CO2 directly into the atmosphere. So if we want to take a broad view, so generating it locally, right, has all of that benefit immediately. The other place to bring it, okay, we probably believe that Norway to here is okay. Bring it from Qatar, right, through the Gulf of Aden. I did my PhD in the Gulf of Aden. At that time, we were buzzed by Russian MiGs from Berbera. Right, now it's Somali pirates. There are 17 vessels, including an oil tanker, being held by Somali pirates. Now, I don't know if you want to think very carefully about a very large liquefied natural gas tanker being held by Somali pirates. It isn't actually even yours until it's what's called free on board. Right? Until it lands, if somebody says, I'll give you 8 million cubic feet more, that ship can turn and go somewhere else. We get it here, we have to use it immediately because, as Dr. Freer has said, we have 12 at best days of supply. We've been down to 2 to 3 days of supply. Major companies in your claw, right, bought 2 refineries just to try to ensure their supply of energy. Now, that's not very helpful either. In fact, actually, France and Germany probably have 10 times that much. So it's a question of securing a supply of gas. I think most of you probably may have gas. I don't in my village, as it happens, but that's by the by. 47% of our electricity is generated by gas, and 70% of domestic cooking is done on gas. Right? Unless we're going to substitute those immediately, we do not really have any option in terms of a global energy scenario, but to actually deal with gas. Now, as I said, if it takes more CO2 to actually bring it than it takes to burn it, there is actually something wrong with that system.
Okay. I shall pass the mic to my colleague here. Any further questions of a general nature? Yes, please. I'll take that one over there because you've not had a chance to speak before. I'm sorry.
Guy Leach, I'm a member of the public. The economic benefits of boosting shale gas production seem obvious and have been talked about, and the security of supply benefits are obvious. And it's being done in the States. And the main difference sounds as if it's not the geology, it's not the economics, other than that it's more viable with a higher price here. It's the regulatory environment. So could I ask the same question again of Tony Grayling, if he didn't answer, he didn't get the chance to answer just now, is how long do you think it'll take to allow commercial production to happen? Because that does seem to be what's stopping it from happening.
There's a microphone on its way, Tony, while you compose your answer.
I don't have a definitive answer to that question. I think it will be several years at best before we move to commercial production, even assuming that conclude that it can resume as an activity, because that is the experience elsewhere. Yes, in the United States we now have a situation where shale gas accounts for 30% or thereabouts of gas production in the States, and that fraction is growing, but it's actually taken them quite a long time to get there. And I would dispute the notion that regulation is getting in the way of development. I think regulation is an absolutely necessary part of ensuring there is public confidence so that the industry can develop. And without you know, without the proper regulation that I was describing and that we implement along with DEC and the Health and Safety Executive, I don't think there would be any public confidence that this activity would be proceeding in a safe and responsible way. And we are definitely, as an environment agency, as with all industrial activities, taking a sustainable development approach, which is not, it is not that we want to block this activity, it's that we want to ensure that it happens in an environmentally and socially responsible responsible way. It's what we call a yes-if approach, but the if matters. You know, the if it is done in an environmentally responsible way matters a lot.
Can I just ask whether any of the geologists wanted to respond to another part of that point, which was to say that there was no difference in essentially in the geology, because I'm not sure if that's the case. The US geology of shale gas, I understand, is quite different to that in Europe, for example.
Mike, would you like to answer that? Or
Yeah.
the microphone here.
Yeah. I don't know where that's coming from, this idea that it's you know, different in Europe. I mean, if you look at the different...
The environments in which it's been exploited in the US
okay.
are geologically very different from those that we're talking about, for example, when looking at the UK cases.
No, I would say, for example, one of the things that we've based our work on in the north of England is on the similarity of the lower carboniferous Bowland Shale with the Barnett Shale. You know, there are differences. It's a bigger basin. It's probably got a stronger marine influence, but it's the same age rock. The same kinds of organic matter was being contributed to the basin by the same sorts of living things generating the organic matter. And you know, no doubt Devonian plays in the United Kingdom, if there were any, would be similar to, for example, the Marcellus. It's not. I don't think there's a big geological difference. Having said that, they're having trouble in Poland. I mean, lots of wells have been drilled, and they haven't had an awful lot of success. You know, there may be differences in stress, residual stress, and but I think overall the geology's not vastly different here in the UK.
Okay, thank you very much. There was a question over here. We'll take this one and then one over here, and then we'll close. Thank you.
Thank you. It's David Ruddock from ERM. I have a question about the microseismic monitoring, particularly. I think the monitoring that Quadrilla is being undertaken may have been voluntarily, but going forward, would you expect new regulations around that, maybe associated with the pedal process, and who would have responsibility for implementing the regulations? Would that be an Environment Agency or an HSE thing?
Peter.
Well, I can partly comment on this. I guess there are people who are more competent to comment. I'm looking at one of them, whether she cares to say anything, I don't really know. I can only advise. I think it is actually a very useful tool, and I'm not disparaging monitoring pressure in boreholes, but we're talking about short periods of time here. As Eric has said, you know, we're talking about a week's worth of work. You don't get hydrogeological changes propagated over great distances through low permeability shales in time to do anything. Microseismic, you do. So I do think, you know, in the US, it's a huge industry monitoring the microseismicity associated with hydrofracking and other activities like that. And it has proved very valuable because there are people making huge careers about doing it. So I think it has to be part of it. Whether it has to be written into DEX regulations or EA regulations, I'm not really sure. But my best scientific opinion is that it's a very important part of the process and one of the few ways to know what's going on underground. The rock is telling us what's happening. You know, we need to listen to it. But you know, it's not up to me to design regulation. Thank God.
Tony wishes to add to that.
Just a very brief comment, and I won't, of course, hardly Tony to be embarrassed. I think basically it would be conditions under the Petroleum Exploration and Development Licence that would require microseismic monitoring. That is where we don't need to change the regulations, the regulatory power, using the power.
Thank you. There's one last question over here, this gentleman here, and we can finish.
Hi there, my name's Chris Duffy. I'm also from Grantham LSE. No one's addressed the timescale issue. Sorry to come back to it again, but if we can't address the elephant in the room of when does this get up and running, can someone tell me, possibly Tony, what the timescales are for this seismic report, when that finishes, what comes next, and when does that finish?
Well, I think that...
Microphone, please, Tony, just to capture this for the record.
As I understand the next steps, the period for public comment on the expert report that Professor Stiles and others produced closed at the end of May. That report, alongside the public comments on it, is now under consideration by the Department of Energy and Climate Change, and in due course, which we understand will be no earlier than July, but probably later, because these things need to be done carefully and properly, and because ministers understand the the difficulty and complexity of the issues. It could well be later than July before we get a response from.
For me to say, but yes, we are presently.
I have to say, I'm not trying to avoid answering questions. It's just that I'm a geologist, and these are important policy decisions that are being, really can't speak for the department. But Tony Grayling certainly is in contact with the policy level people that are making decisions, and we'll make an answer as soon as we can. We're carefully looking at all the comments we got. We'd like to understand all the technical issues.
Well, thank you very much. I think we'll draw the proceedings to a close now. I just want to say a few words before we leave the room for a cup of tea. I think all will leave this room with a number of unanswered questions in our minds. Certainly, I've learnt a lot, and there are a lot of questions I want to discuss further with colleagues in academia and outside academia, and I'm sure that all the speakers will be going away with additional items that they wish to pursue as a consequence of the discussion we've had today. So can I remind you that you can contact policy at the Geological Society through the website and through the email system, or using the questionnaire that's available on the reception desk, and leave your completed questionnaires there, please, when you leave the building. You can ask questions and we'll try to answer them. There will be follow-up to this meeting. There will be a short report, briefing note that the Society will produce, which will take on board some of the comments that have arisen today, and that will be sent out to everyone who's registered for this meeting. So I'd like to urge you to watch this space, because clearly this is an issue which is going to develop over the months that come. I would say that time scale, that we will see news coming out, things happening over the coming months, rather than having to wait another 200 years for the Geological Society's 4th centenary celebrations, by which time our energy systems will be so completely different we can't possibly imagine them now. I'd like you to join me in thanking not only the 5 speakers that we've had today, but in thanking those members of the audience who have asked questions. It's been a very good dialogue for us. I apologise to those members of the audience who haven't had a chance to have questions answered as fully as they would have liked. I hope we've managed to stick to what we claim to stick to, and that is the facts, and try to keep some of the opinions a little bit in the background for now, because those are opinions which are formed by individuals for particular purposes. We want to focus on the facts, and we've tried to do that today to our best. But please join me in thanking the speakers, and then we will have a cup of tea outside.